Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare, and welcome back to Weaving Worlds. So I think I'll be stepping away from the deep dive series for a while, but before then, I've got one last subject to look at. Because of all the creatures out there that show up in fantasy and science fiction and horror works, I don't think there's one with nearly the same level of diversity in presentation as today's topic, dragons. So let's have a look at just how many types of dragons there are. What is a dragon? A dragon is a large lizard or lizard-like creature that can have a variety of abilities depending on what story is talking about them. A dragon might be smarter than a human or as simple as an animal. It might breathe fire or acid or nothing at all. It might be as big as a horse or as big as a mountain. And it might be as strong as a tiger or a god in its own right. Some dragons have 4 legs and 2 wings, some dragons have 2 legs and 2 wings, and some have no wings and are fully landbound. The reason dragons come in so many varieties, even in the original myths, is because they're most likely based on dinosaur bones and other fossils. Back before humans fully understood the Earth's age or how fossilization works, people would discover the stone bones of giant lizard-like creatures and do their best to figure out what those things were. And because they had no concept of extinction, they would assume that other giant lizards were still out there somewhere. From that basis, people would come up with wild ideas about what these dragons could do, and then they invented stories about people interacting with dragons, sometimes peacefully and sometimes violently. Power personified. If there's one thing you can say about dragons, no matter what story or culture they come from, it's that they're powerful. And it's no wonder people think of them like that. Many dinosaurs were bigger than elephants. Plus, people would see claw marks or footprints or partial skeletons left in what seems to be solid stone. Today we know that the stone came afterwards, but to ancient observers, it would take a powerful monster to leave clear tracks in stone or to be fused and buried in it. And so that's the main role that dragons serve, no matter what other features authors give them. Power. Dragons are physically powerful, and they may also be powerful in other ways. Powerful minds, powerful magic, a furnace in the stomach that lets them melt through stone, a hoard of gold that could fund a nation for years, and so on. A dragon as an enemy is a major threat that the heroes have to overcome. And a dragon as an ally is a major help that the authors have to be careful in using so that they don't overshadow the protagonist. Unless a dragon is the protagonist, but in that case you'll need a major threat to challenge it. Dragons as the ultimate monster. This depiction of dragons is probably the oldest, at least in Western mythology. In modern-day Libya, St. George slew a dragon that was terrorizing a town and converted all its people to Christianity in the process. In the origin myth of Krakow, the city's king, or else a humble shoemaker, tricks a dragon into eating a dead cow stuffed full of sulfur, and it dies of poisoning. In Wales, the national symbol is a red dragon, based on an old story about a red dragon fighting a white dragon under a castle. A dragon of this sort is less of a character and more of a challenge, an obstacle that the hero needs to overcome to receive some sort of reward or recognition. Such a dragon can be intelligent or not, and if it's intelligent that would also make it a character, but the main concern is whether or not this dragon is the right sort of challenge for the protagonist. You want it to be serious enough for death to be a real possibility, but still weak enough for it to be plausible that the protagonist can kill it. Because if your protagonist does something that's impossible, and I mean really literally impossible, your readers won't be happy. Dragons as gods. This idea is more in line with the Eastern concept of dragons. Instead of being monsters that the hero must overcome, a dragon is more of a divine figure, a creature that either interacts with gods or is a god in its own right. For instance, one of the 4 Chinese gods who represent the cardinal directions is the Azure Dragon, and this dragon was on the Qing dynasty's flag. There are also 4 dragons associated with bodies of water surrounding China, and dragons are also associated with clouds and precipitation. When a dragon is divine, it's pretty easy to see how it represents power, but it also means the dragon is less useful when it comes to the plot. The more a god interferes with a story, the less interesting that story becomes, because a god can do basically whatever they want. So unless your protagonist is also a god and therefore on even footing with a divine dragon, you should only have your dragon interact with the plot in limited ways. Maybe it just empowers the protagonist for a climactic battle, or it endorses the protagonist and any actual help it provides is implied at best. Or you might have it play a more active role in the story, but its actions are constrained by divine rules or other harsh restrictions. Another option is to have dragons be more present but less interactive, by making them literal parts of the scenery. Perhaps like Uranus and Gaia, the dragons of your world are literally the earth and the sky. Or else their backs are the mountain ranges and a volcanic eruption means they're snoring in their sleep. And with all that in mind, one would have to wonder what would happen if someone were to wake such a dragon up, or perhaps even worse, kill it. Dragons as Puppetmasters. In the Eberron setting, dragons center their lives around something called the Draconic Prophecy, which is long, complex, open-ended, and constantly growing as dragons study the stars and add to it. The dragons use this knowledge to attempt to bring about the future they desire, but because of all the prophecy's moving parts, they can't risk acting directly. Instead, they work behind the scenes, using magic and humanoid agents to make the right bits of the prophecy come true. The dragons have a good reason for doing all of this, since they're trying to stop the Lords of Dust from unmaking reality, but as a consequence, they view lesser creatures like humans as pawns and puppets. In Shadowrun, the Great Dragons are ancient beings of great intelligence and great patience, and they can hide their identities by assuming humanoid forms. They don't have the united and noble goals that Eberron dragons do, but they do make use of magic, trickery, and occasional shows of force to amass fortunes and gain power without revealing themselves in the process. After all, dragons are dangerous and valuable sources of magical materials, and so if they stick their necks out too far, they're bound to get chopped off. The way this can work in your setting is to have your dragons effectively be the power behind the throne, or at least the power behind some thrones. This sort of dragon would have to be able to assume human form, or else have a lot of human agents who could act as a buffer and keep their draconic nature a secret from the world at large. In this mode, dragons mainly represent the power of influence, rather than the power of physical strength or material wealth. Dragons as rulers. Rather than be hidden powers, what if dragons are actively in charge of everything? A lot of Dungeons & Dragons settings have historical periods during which the dragons were in charge, and this includes the Forgotten Realms. A lot of other settings also have dragons in charge, and after all, rulership is the ultimate expression of power, and is the natural result of gathering so much physical might, magical ability, and material wealth in one place. A dragon ruler creates some interesting opportunities that a creator can explore. After all, human leaders are often accused of being out of touch with the people they lead, and that's with the shared experience of being human. So, what if a leader doesn't have that common ground? Because they're 50 feet long, their lifespan is 10 times that of a human, they can breathe fire on anyone they don't like, and they're extremely hard to kill. Would such a leader be a bad thing because they can't understand any of their subjects' needs or wants? Or would such a leader be a good thing because they don't want the same things as humans, and so they're willing to share the wealth because wealth is something they don't value? Dragons as animals. Rather than being a limitless source of power and intelligence, what if dragons were simply a unique species or family of animal that doesn't exist on Earth but does exist in your setting? What if they're smart by animal standards but still well below the threshold of sapience? And while they still have many of the qualities of dragons like flight and fire breath, they aren't nearly as dangerous as dragons are in other settings. In that case, hunting dragons would be like hunting regular dangerous animals, something that's dramatic and adventurous, but not necessarily the focus of an epic story. And perhaps killing dragons isn't part of the story, and instead the focus is on taming and befriending dragons. A dragon is a symbol of power regardless of which mythology you draw on, and you should keep that in mind, even if your setting features unintelligent dragons or large draconic armies. Because while your dragons might be good or bad or both, they should always be significant. Thanks for joining me again for today's journey into Weaving Worlds. Please like, share, and subscribe because that raises my visibility here on YouTube. Check out my other stuff if you have some time, support me on Patreon if you have some money, and I hope I'll see you again for the next video.